Donc, je m'appelle Colette Brun, je suis la directrice du Centre d'études sur les médias. Ça me fait plaisir de vous entendre et de vous voir tous ici. Nous avons discuté de la question de fond, de la question de l'enjeu des fausses nouvelles et comment il faut l'appeler, comment il faut la comprendre. Je pense qu'on n'a pas épuisé le sujet et on va sûrement y revenir. Mais le panel que j'ai l'honneur de vous présenter maintenant porte sur la recherche empirique, qui porte sur donc des pratiques de propagation de fausses nouvelles, pour les appeler ainsi, on va les appeler ainsi pour les fins de la discussion, et aussi des méthodes pour les combattre, donc des efforts. Monsieur Silverman disait on manque d'études, de mesures sur l'efficacité des outils pour combattre les fake news. Donc, on va peut-être avoir des réponses ici ce matin. Donc, notre première, je vais vous présenter les trois présentatrices pour commencer, et ensuite on va enchaîner avec la discussion, avec les présentations. Donc, Samantha Bradshaw, donc, qui est une Canadienne et qui est doctorante à l'Université d'Oxford, à l'Institut Internet, de Oxford Internet Institute, et dont la recherche porte sur la manipulation par les acteurs étatiques sur les médias sociaux. Ensuite, Madame Nadine Kozak de l'Université de Wisconsin, qui est également canadienne, à l'Université de Wisconsin à Milwaukee, et qui s'est intéressée à l'initiative d'un groupe de journalistes militants en Ukraine pour combattre la propagande russe lors du conflit dans ce pays, et qui nous présentera les résultats de cette étude. Et en terminant, nous avons Victoria Rubin, qui est professeure à l'Université Western à London, en Ontario, qui n'est pas canadienne, mais qui est ukrainienne. Donc, on aura peut-être un débat ici sur le cas de l'Ukraine, un débat géopolitique. Et dont les travaux portent dans la discipline des sciences de l'information, et qui s'intéresse aux outils, en fait, et qui développe, je pense, elle-même aussi des outils à la fois informatiques et qui suscitent les compétences critiques des usagers pour permettre aux usagers eux-mêmes de faire une partie du travail de ce combat contre les fausses informations. Donc, on vous écoute. Madame Bradshaw, je dois aussi être très sévère sur le temps, donc vous avez 15 minutes.
Great. Thanks for the introduction. And I should say it's really great to be up here with three other amazing women doing great work in this field. So today I'm going to talk about some of the research that we're doing at Oxford University under the Computational Propaganda Project. I've sort of broken my presentation down into two different parts. The first part is going to look at the elections that have happened throughout 2016 and 2017, and we did a bunch of studies that looked at the amount of junk news, which is our term for fake news, that was being shared during those elections on social media and on Twitter in particular. Depending on time, for the second half of the presentation, I was going to look at some of the state actors that are investing in fake news and digital disinformation, because in the news media right now, there's a lot of talk about Russian interference in the U.S. election. I'd like us to take a step back and realize that this isn't just like a one-off, but that governments all around the world are investing in capabilities to launch disinformation campaigns against their own citizens or against citizens in other countries. So that's kind of the overview, and then I'll finish with some policy recommendations as to what I think are the low-hanging fruit to address some of these new challenges. So, as I mentioned, we call fake news junk news, and the definition that we've been working with is that junk news is various forms of propaganda and ideologically extreme, hyperpartisan, or conspiratorial political news and information. So when you hear me referring to junk news, it's these kinds of headlines that I'm referring to. So things that, Pope Francis endorsed Trump, that was one of the big stories that went viral throughout the election. Things that appear to be real news stories or real fact-check information, but actually aren't. So that the bottom category there, which is fact check. Yes, Hillary Clinton did hire activists to disrupt rallies, Trump rallies across the US. So on the Comprop project, we began by looking at what voters were sharing in Michigan leading up to the 2016 election. And we scraped these tweets in real time. We had about 22 million tweets that we collected across all of the United States. And then we just focused specifically on Michigan because it was kind of a pilot study. We wanted to see if there was a lot of junk news being shared on social media in this state because it was a swing state. And so there's about 138,000 tweets that we were working with. The first thing that you can do with tweets is you can see how popular certain candidates are, whether or not they're being tweeted about more or less on social media. And these numbers reflected the national average. So on the right, you can see the collection of hashtags that we followed that were related to the US election. That way we were only collecting content that had to do with politics at the time. And then on the left, you can see how much each candidate was being tweeted about. And you can see that pro-Trump tweets pretty much were dominating Twitter. They made up 56.7% of the traffic. That's about 3 times more than pro-Clinton tweets. The next thing we did was we wanted to evaluate the kinds of information that people were sharing to outside news sources. So we took all the tweets that had URLs to something like the New York Times or to other outside sources of information and began to evaluate them. And this is a breakdown of what we found. So of those 25,000 tweets, the amount of junk content that was being shared in Michigan was about a 1-to-1 ratio to the professionally produced news. So things that came from the New York Times, things that came from Washington Post. For every junk conspiracy theory story out there, there was one piece of professionally produced information. And one of the interesting things was how this changed over time. So this was our trend line, and this is the amount of professionally produced news. And the day before the election was the day that professionally produced news hit its lowest point, where the amount of junk content being shared on Twitter hit its highest point. The next thing that we just recently did was we looked at the swing states, the rest of the swing states, and all of the U.S. Because we thought, well, hey, this is pretty interesting. Junk news is being shared quite a bit in the U.S. Was this just in Michigan, or was this trend across all of the U.S.? And when we took a step back, we had about 1 million tweets that we were able to place in the different states based on where users reported their location on Twitter. And out of the 16 swing states that were listed, 12 of them had higher proportions of junk news being shared compared to uncontested states. So uncontested states generally were sharing more professional information opposed to the swing states. And this trend also carries across the world and other elections, although in the US, that was kind of where we saw the most junk news, with the exception of France. So we did a bunch of studies that followed the German elections, the French elections, and the elections in the UK throughout 2017. In Germany, they remained consistent. It was about 4-to-1 professionally produced content to junk news. So it was a little bit of a healthier debate going on in social media leading up to the elections. In France, you can see that trend where the amount of junk content tends to increase as you get closer to election day. We did a study earlier on, and it was about, that was back in March, maybe about 2 months or a month before everyone was going out to vote. And the ratio was about 2-to-1. When you got closer to the election, it went from 1-to-1. And then in the UK, we went 4-to-1 to 4% professionally produced content to 4-to-1 in terms of the ratio of professionally produced content to junk news, and then 5-to-1. So as I mentioned, this isn't just a phenomenon that's happening in the U.S. and in Western democracies. There are countries all around the world that are investing in different capacities to spread disinformation around important political events. This is just a simple line graph that highlights 28 different countries around the world that the Comprop team has identified that have government actors spending money on these sorts of campaigns. So in terms of who is doing it, we did a big content analysis back in June to try and identify all the different countries. And then the next step of that methodology was to bring in secondary sources from other academics, from government publications, and then we also did some in-person interviews and consulted experts on the field to make sure that all the content that was going into this report was correct. And we did a big comparative study of the different countries that are investing in this. So who's doing it? State actors will work with a variety of different actors. So sometimes they hire on private companies, strategic communication firms to do their propaganda campaigns or disinformation campaigns. This might be around elections or other important political referenda. We see them working with civil society. So in Israel, there's a big youth group, youth presence on social media, and the government will actually work with them and offer scholarships to students who help promote their party line on social media. We also see volunteers. This is Duterte's big thing. We see him investing a small amount of money into a small team of a small firm, and they went out into their own social networks and did what we call an AstroTurf campaign, which is supposed to be like a grassroots movement, but it's not actually. It's real grassroots actors. It just gives that impression that it actually is. How? There are different tools that these different governments use. One thing that we track a lot on the computational propaganda project is bots. And so bots are little bits of code that run on social media. They usually have a dictionary, and they do a bunch of different things. So they can amplify certain stories. They can amplify certain tweets. They can gain a lot of followers so that when they do tweet out maybe one or two things, a lot of people will see it. They do all kinds of things. And there's also a big variety in the ways that different governments use these tools. So the blue on the map is just human users operating accounts on social media. The yellow is what we call cyborg accounts, which is that mix of bot and human user. And then automated is the bot accounts. We also know that governments will hire people to engage with users online. And so this has to do with promoting pro-government messages, things that support the regime. Other techniques that we've identified have to do with trolling or harassment. A lot of female journalists and prominent feminist academics are often targeted by trolls online and are often actually they often remove themselves from social media as a result of these highly coordinated trolling campaigns. And then neutral comments are things that often distract or dissuade the conversation away from the issue that's being discussed. So we see this a lot in the U.S. And the Russian interference in the U.S. election, creating all these different narratives that kind of distract away from the important policy issues. And then with what? In the Cyber Troops report, there are varying budgets that governments will spend. You can hire a firm in Bahrain to run your propaganda campaign for you for about $4,000 US. Other countries like the US, they've spent about $42 million on these sorts of things. A lot of that money goes into research and development for understanding how messages spread across social media. Okay, so thinking about policy responses to junk news and to government disinformation, these are kind of my three low-hanging fruit. So the first is archiving political advertisements on social media. So with social media, it seems like the law hasn't quite caught up to that, how we advertise on social media. So with television and newspaper, generally advertisements that are sponsored by political parties have to be archived, and there's a record of them. There's a record of who saw these advertisements, when they were played, how long they were played for, and what kind of content they contained. On social media, we don't see that same kind of archival record keeping. And then that's why we have problems with the Trump campaign, for example, buying these things called dark posts, where different versions of a political advertisement are given to different people, depending on their skin color, depending on their sex, their religion, and whatnot. So that is one kind of low-hanging fruit to help clean up the information ecosystem and create more accountability when it comes to advertising in democracies. The second thing that I have been thinking about is identifying sponsored content in social media news feeds. They're now in the media, we're getting all these revelations about the Russians spending $100,000 to buy and place ads on Facebook. The way that Facebook displays sponsored content, they just say it's sponsored. They don't say who it's sponsored by. And that would be one really easy way to say that, to fix this issue, so that I know that when I see an ad from New York Times, that it's New York Times that paid for that ad. Or if I see an ad for yoga pants, I know what company is targeting me to sell me those products. And then the third thing is labeling bot accounts. Throughout all the elections that we followed, we saw bots and these high-frequency accounts retweeting and flooding and polluting the information ecosystem. But bots also can serve a very good purpose when it comes to companies, advertising on social media. There's also this really great bot that during the Trump's first ban on refugees and immigration, there was this bot that took the name of a Jewish immigrant that came to the US, and then their date of birth and their death, because these immigrants all came on a boat but then were denied by the US government and they were sent away. And so every minute this bot would play the name and tweet out the name and death of someone that had died because they weren't allowed entry into the US. And that was a very powerful way to use this technology to get people discussing politics in a really meaningful way. So I don't necessarily think bots are always bad, but I think we should be able to, or we should have to identify these accounts that are operating on social media as being bots. So yeah, that's my presentation.
Perfect. Thank you.
Hopefully it wasn't too over.
Non, il nous reste 15 secondes pour passer à la prochaine. Merci.
Ça, c'est moi. Oui, merci. Bonjour. J'ai conduit cette recherche avec mes collègues Maria Haig et Thomas Haig. En Ukraine, Russie utilise les actions militaires, l'activité politique et la propagande en même temps. La désinformation étendue par les médias d'information est au centre de la campagne. Le groupe Stop Fake a été formé en Ukraine pour se battre avec l'utilisation des informations comme une arme. Pour faire ceci, Stop Fake a adopté l'autorité culturelle de vérification de faits et a fait appel à l'objectivité des journalistes occidentaux. Cependant, à cause du caractère d'activiste du groupe, ils ont décidé de seulement refuter des nouvelles fausses. Cette décision met Stop Fake en dehors des groupes de vérification de faits occidentaux comme PolitiFact. Stop Fake est une organisation bénévole formée par des journalistes ukrainiens pendant la révolution ukrainienne de la dignité de 2014 qui a publié la réfutation des fausses informations du conflit ukrainien publiées par les journalistes russes. Les journalistes étaient tout diplôme d'école de journalisme, l'Académie Mohoya de Kiev. L'école a fourni quelques ressources aux journalistes et le groupe a obtenu environ $200 par mois via dons en ligne. Il y avait 6 éditeurs situés en Ukraine et des autres personnes volontaires pour traduire les articles en anglais et faire le travail technique. Ces gens étaient situés à l'extérieur de l'Ukraine, en Europe et en Amérique du Nord. Les éditeurs ont créé un site web, stopfake.org, sur lequel sont réfutées des fausses nouvelles, provenant principalement des médias russes. Le travail de StopFake est effectué exclusivement sur le courrier électronique et des réseaux sociaux. La contribution distinctive de StopFake doit adapter le dit de vérification de faits pour contre une campagne de propagande étrangère. D'habitude, les organisations de vérification de faits évaluant les réclamations isolées faites par des politiciens domestiques pour les publics intérieurs. Au contraire, StopFake évaluait la propagande russe pour les publics russes, occidentaux et domestiques. Notre objectif de recherche était d'étudier comment ces groupes prouvaient que les articles russes étaient faux. Nous avons découvert que la vérification des faits par StopFake est faite différemment de la vérification de faits aux États-Unis. Aux États-Unis, ceux qui vérifient les faits, supposant que le public aura confiance en l'objectivité journalistique, mais soutiennent que les journalistes ne devraient pas rapporter des réclamations rivales sans les évaluer. Aux États-Unis, ceux qui vérifient les faits ou fact-checkers prenant des comptes rendus de déclarations politiques ou des articles d'opinion et demandant aux experts universitaires de les évaluer. De plus, l'évaluation prend l'intention de l'écriture en compte. Les résultats sont présentés comme un classement avec des déclarations jugées soit plutôt vraies, soit plutôt fausses, soit comme un tissu de mensonges. StopFake se présente aussi comme un vérificateur de faits, mais leur approche est différente. Les vérificateurs de faits américains, supposant que les journalistes rapportant des informations spécifiques, le font de façon précise et honnête. Au contraire, StopFake évaluait le travail des journalistes et cherchait des nouveaux fausses basés sur la preuve fabriquée. Les volontaires déclarant qu'ils travaillaient seulement avec des faits et pas des opinions. PolitiFact s'est concentré sur l'interprétation, alors que StopFake est intéressant par des questions plus générales. Où et quand a été prise cette photographie? Où et quand cet article est-il censé s'attendre déroulé? La personne citée est-elle identifiée correctement? Notre recherche utilise des méthodes qualitatives afin d'étudier et analyser le processus de travail et les produits de StopFake. Nous avons analysé 18 mois de vérification de faits de mars 2014 à août 2015. Nous avons rassemblé les articles affichés sur le site web anglais de StopFake et nous avons utilisé l'analyse de contenu pour déterminer le type de preuves utilisées par StopFake pour déclarer des informations comme fausses. Au début, StopFake examinait les articles d'information soumis à les sites web via une plateforme de soumission. À bout d'un moment, les éditeurs de StopFake ont commencé à parcourir des médias russes, parmi lesquels Vesti, le Russian Spring et Noya Russia, et des médias ukrainiens aussi, pour trouver des articles à examiner. Les éditeurs ont lu et vu ces articles et ont rejeté ceux qui semblent être vrais ou ils ne pouvant pas identifier définitivement comme étant faux. L'équipe de StopFake n'avait pas les ressources suffisantes pour évaluer un grand nombre des articles. En une semaine, StopFake a identifié 250 faux potentiels, mais publie seulement 5 articles exposant des faits faux. Pendant notre période d'étude, le temps de traitement moyen entre la publication de fausses informations et la publication par StopFake d'une réfutation est passé d'1,6 jours à 5,4 jours. Les résultats sont présentés dans le tableau. Comme les vérificateurs américains, l'éditeur de StopFake ont présenté une déclaration et ensuite récapitulé le processus d'investigation et les preuves ressemblent pour l'évaluer. Chaque réfutation qu'ils ont publiée présente au moins une forme de preuve. Nous avons utilisé le rapport publié par StopFake pour catégoriser les éléments de preuve utilisés par le groupe pour le refus des fausses informations. Il y a 9 catégories utilisées. Au cours des 18 mois de notre étude, StopFake a publié 539 réfutations. Dans 39% des cas, la source originale ne contient pas des informations dans la nouvelle. L'analyse de contenu a montré que pour 35% des cas, une photographie était mal identifiée. Dans 25% des cas, une citation était éditée de façon trompeuse. Contrairement aux vérificateurs de faits américains qui se basent sur des évaluations par des experts, seulement 11% des posts de StopFake comportent des évaluations par des experts. Une autre catégorie utilise lourdement par les Américains la statistique gouvernementale et utilise seulement 12% du temps pour StopFake. Les éditeurs de StopFake utilisent la statistique gouvernementale seulement pendant les 9 premiers mois. Le groupe utilise des fonctionnaires pour confirmer ou infirmer des déclarations 14% du temps. Ces résultats d'autres sont présentés dans cet tableau. Les 3 méthodes que StopFake utilise le plus fréquemment pour l'évaluation sont basées sur les images, les faits et les citations dans un article. StopFake vérifie si ces éléments viennent être manipulés ou mal identifiés. StopFake a trouvé quelques fausses nouvelles faciles à réfuter. Beaucoup de médias russes ont utilisé des photographies trouvées sur les réseaux sociaux. Les histoires russes, les articles russes disant que les photos montraient des atrocités effectuées par des soldats ukrainiens. StopFake utilise des techniques numériques simples pour réfuter ces déclarations. Les métadonnées, incluant les dates et l'heure auxquelles la photo est prise, et parfois les coordonnées GPS pour prouver que la photo ne pouvait pas illustrer les informations associées. Les médias russes utilisent des photographies de la guerre en Syrie et des cartels de drogue mexicains comme preuve des agressions ukrainiennes. Les éditeurs ont aussi trouvé des photographies manipulées par les médias russes. Par exemple, une image dans les médias russes montre une petite fille avec un panneau disant « Nous voulons la guerre ». Mais le panneau original dit « Nous ne voulons pas la guerre ». Pour des autres articles, les éditeurs de StopFake utilisent des pratiques journalistes traditionnelles, par exemple localiser des entretiens originaux ou des documents sur lesquels les actualités russes étaient basées. Certaines fausses nouvelles comportaient des citations éditées de façon trompeuse. Dans un cas, Russia Today avait diffusé une entrevue avec le grand rabbin d'une synagogue de Kiev, disant à ses fidèles d'émigrer à cause de la violence antisémite. StopFake a constaté que le rabbin était le rabbin de Simferopol, un Crimée, discutant des conditions sous l'occupation russe. C'est aussi un exemple de fausse identification d'un individu. Dans 9% des cas, StopFake a publié les réfutations basées sur le travail d'autres groupes. Par exemple, des médias russes ont annoncé que des forces soutenues par les Russes avaient trouvé des armes américaines à l'aéroport de Luhansk. Le site web Reddit a révélé que le texte présent sur les images d'armes américaines était orthographié comme dans un célèbre jeu vidéo, Battlefield 3, pas comme dans la réalité. Dans un dernier exemple, StopFake a avec succès prouvé qu'un événement n'avait pas eu lieu en juillet 2014. Des médias russes ont rapporté une entrevue avec une femme russe qui a prétendu que des soldats ukrainiens ont crucifié un petit garçon et ont ensuite traîné sa mère dans les rues jusqu'à elle meurt. StopFake rapporte qu'il n'y avait aucune photographie des événements, malgré des fous dans la rue, qui ce rapport russe ne correspondait pas aux déclarations de médias indépendants environ les jours et que l'article ressemblait à un épisode de Game of Thrones. Les médias occidentaux ont aussi rapporté que cette information était fausse. StopFake a aussi réfuté des informations en la province de l'Ukraine qui soutenaient que l'entrevue était une actrice qui apparaissait dans des différents reportages sur la télévision russe. La neutralité de StopFake sur cet exemple a augmenté la crédibilité internationale parce qu'il ne dénonçait pas seulement la propagande antinationaliste. En effet, 9% des rapports de StopFake concernaient des médias ukrainiens. En général, ceux-ci étaient des articles repris dans les médias ukrainiens depuis des sources russes. Au fil du temps, les types de preuves les plus fréquemment utilisés pour contredire des informations fausses ont changé. La proportion de fausses nouvelles dévoilées en trouvant les sources des images utilisées a diminué de 43% de mars à mai 2014 à 30% sur la période finale de 3 mois que nous avons analysée. En revanche, la proportion de rapports de StopFake utilisant la source originale d'une citation pour montrer qu'elle avait été présentée de façon trompeuse est montée de 6 à 60% à cause de la même période. Ces changements suggèrent que les fausses nouvelles russes sont devenues plus sophistiquées avec le temps. Les éditeurs de StopFake se sont engagés à soutenir l'objectivité journaliste et présentant des faits fausses aux mensonges. Pour ce faire, ils ont utilisé des pratiques journalistes traditionnelles, mais aussi des stratégies numériques plus récentes. StopFake combat les fausses nouvelles et utilise l'alphabétation médiatique et le journalisme responsable. Le groupe a connu le succès via la diffusion de travail sur les réseaux sociaux et est apparu dans les médias occidentaux. La situation est difficile pour StopFake, cependant, car seuls les articles réfutés à caractère sensationnel peuvent vraiment se reprendre. De plus, les médias russes ont un poids énorme, ce qui rend la tâche de StopFake non seulement plus dure, mais aussi plus importante. Si vous voulez avoir plus de détails de notre étude, notre papier a été publié dans le Journalism Studies cette année. Je vous remercie pour cette occasion de partager notre recherche et j'espère que mon français n'est pas trop mal.
Nous allons maintenant entendre Mme Rubin.
Merci. Bonjour autrefois, but I will speak in English. I am in the field of information science. and the kind of studies I do are called natural language processing studies. It's a mix of computer science and linguistics. What we usually do in terms of methods is we identify a narrow concept or a narrow phenomena. We look for patterns in texts, and we write algorithms to try to identify these patterns. We need data, we need good data. So if we're talking about sad as an emotion versus happy as an emotion, we'll have a lot of text of sad tweets versus happy tweets, and then we can find them and predict. If we see a tweet that we don't know whether it's sad or happy, we'll predict whether it is one or the other. So the phenomenon I have been studying in the past 7 years is deception, mensonge, lies. And specifically since 2013 or 14, deception in news. So I will talk about the current state of deception detection, and the main goal of my talk is to draw your attention to this amazing field, natural language processing, and specifically automated deception detection. I have always thought that labeling deceptive information would be enough. In the last 3-4 months, I have come to a conclusion. It's a matter of getting the users unhooked. I don't know if you see my neat graphic right there. So it's about not believing the deception, in my mind, helping people to opt out. And let me ask you something. I generally believe that it's a matter of novelty and inexperience of the society and perhaps many professions, such as journalists, information scientists, even psychologists. To me, it's about patterns. If I were to ask you, you come home and you see a sweepstakes flyer in your mailbox, would you throw it away? You're having a dinner and somebody calls you with a deal of your lifetime, would you hang up? If you see a Nigerian prince who've offered a dowry to your daughter, would you put it in your spam box? When it comes to news, we're at a loss sometimes. We don't know the patterns. So it's a matter of patterns that we need to reveal. And that's what I do. I try to reveal, me and my lab, students in my lab. And these patterns are not just the topics of conversation, but slightly subtle properties of text. What it is that it leads us to believe that somebody is lying to you. And will I opt to tango with them? Would I believe or not? So what we do is we apply this interdisciplinary work and we put some science behind it. So we look at psychology, we look at interdisciplinary communication, or interpersonal, communication, and programming and so forth. So the key concept for me is deception. And in information science, it's a communication, a message between a person who is intentionally and knowingly transmitting some information that will cause you to believe something wrong. So it's about creating a false conclusion. It has been studied in psychology for 50 years. Deception detection between people. In the context of digital information, it has been defined by Stanford psychologist Jeff Hancock as an intentional control of information in technologically mediated environments. That hasn't quite surfaced yet in journalism for some reason, or in social studies. How good are we at detecting those lies? Turns out, and as I said, this field has had 50 years of studies, and it's entered the stage of meta-analysis. So if you were to look at about over 1,000 participants where they have given them a particular task that I will introduce you to in a minute, and over 100 experiments, you would find that an average person is likely to tell whether something is a lie or not about 54% of the time, which basically means not much greater than chance. Turns out that some specialists who've had some training are not much better than an average person. Even Border Patrol officers who look so confident when you cross the border, 63% of the chance, but they've had some training, right? So we are poor lie detectors, and that's the crook of the problem. People are going to believe, not just because they're not reading behind the headline, even if they're told there is a potential deception, they will still not be able to tell whether it's true or not. Well, let's look at one little experiment. So what psychologists do, they give you two things to look at, and ask you to tell me which one is a lie. I'm going to read it out since we have translation, and it's up to you to decide which one is the lie. So what you're looking for is not what fits your understanding of the world, but rather a person who is telling you, and that's the same person. That was a study by Rada Mihalcea and her colleague in Italy, who has asked people to debate either pro-abortion or pro-choice, and they were given two statements. One of them is completely false. So the first one, I believe abortion is not an option. Once a life has been conceived, it's precious. No one has the right to decide to end it. Life begins at conception, because without conception there is no life. Option B, a woman has free will and free choice over what goes on her body. If the child has not been born, it is under her control. Often the circumstances an unwanted child is born into are worse than death. The mother has the responsibility to choose the best course for her child. I understand there's translation going on still. Okay, so how many people believe that A is a lie? Can you show your hands, if you could? How many people believe that B is a lie? You're just not cooperating. You have to decide one way or the other. I'm literally asking you. Would you show me a hand if you believe A is a deceptive statement? It's not a lie. Well, it's a matter of defining what a lie is. Do you believe the person that has said that is truthful in A or in B? So when are they lying in an A?
Okay.
Yes.
I'll say it's a lie because of the first.
A is a lie.
Yeah,
Okay.
because of the first
Do you agree? So somebody.
What you're saying about yourself.
But I'm saying I believe abortion is not an option.
Yes.
Is a lie.
So there's one person who's giving two statements.
Sorry. It's a half lie. It's a half lie.
Sir, can you speak?
So again, so the definition of a lie, if it doesn't match if the person who is saying it doesn't match what they're saying, right? So the same person have given two statements. In one, they have absolutely truthfully said something. In the other, they have totally falsified their opinion. So it's an opinion, I understand. It's not factual, it's not verifiable, but a person can say, I'm either pro-choice or I'm pro-abortion. And the difficulty is given this task, everybody's puzzled. We don't know when they're lying and when they're not. Well, we look for patterns, and we do know when they're lying. So I'll reveal this. So it's not from my point of view. So a lie is when you are saying what doesn't match what you believe. When the reality of what you believe is different from what you've said. And that has been an accepted definition of deception. When you're convincing somebody else, you're making somebody else conclude falsely something that you do not believe. And that has been around for 50 years. And actually, I could argue it has been around since Aristotle. So this is not a new phenomenon at all. So what we look here is we look for various patterns. What it is that we could look, if we were to collect truthful statements and we were to collect deceptive statements, do we notice the difference? As a matter of fact, we do. The speech of truth tellers has some patterns that is different from the speech of liars or deceivers. So what do I see here? It might not be apparently immediate to you, but it's apparently immediate to somebody who has studied this and have written an algorithm to look and see what are the pronouns that they're using. Little prénom, moi, toi, you, I, he, she. So it turns out that in deceptive statements, there are clear markers. First of all, deceptive statement that's in black, the B, the lie, is longer than the truthful statement. Second of all, there are more references to others than to myself. If I'm saying something I do not believe, I might be distancing myself. I'll say we, the profession, we, the journalists, we, they, children, people. More abstract, more generalized terms are used. And so an example here of an unwanted child, the mother is, of course, not I am a mother. By the way, I do not, so this is not about what I believe or what I don't believe, it's what the person has given. So the person in the truthful statement does say I quite clearly. And you can't necessarily tell for sure for every occasion, but quite often if you look over a large number of statements, you can tell the differences. So this is what I mean by patterns. So how to how do computers assist our poor abilities in lie detection? Well, we find these patterns, and they're usually inaccessible to us unless we statistically scan. So, for instance, deceivers use less self-references, references to I and my and ours. They give less detailed answers. On the other hand, they give more indirect statements. They show more negative emotions. There's a lot of psychology behind it of how you feel when it is that you're stating something you don't believe. They also use a lot of feeling words, sense-based words. And that's something that's been studied in the field of deception detection. So these are the kind of patterns and traces. Or if you are in economics, one word that will give you away is the word fantastic. So don't ever use that word. That was a study that was profiled in The Economist. Turns out there's over 30 linguistic features. As a matter of fact, there are so many of them, I'm not going to go into detail, that people argue which one are more prominent. And they have collected them into bigger concepts of for instance, uncertainty or affect or specificity and so forth. We have made a study in which we found 5 rhetorical features that deal with how you put together an argument. We have found that deceptive news are likely to show more conditional statements, while the truthful news are likely to show more purpose question and restatement. And that was done on the data, comparing black and white from Bluff the Listener, the NPR show. Wait, don't tell me. I don't know if you listened to that. It's the US show on Saturday mornings. So, turns out machines are slightly better than humans. They're not perfect. It's not the kind of accuracy that you would want to make a claim and expose somebody and say, well, you're lying. You're actually pro-choice. But they reach about 70-75% accuracy, which is 20% better than a human being. And if you were to keep working in this field, and I firmly believe this field is on the rise and it will be more visible soon and we will hear more about it, there will be questions about transparency, there will be questions about biases and so forth, but it's possible. So deception is a bigger term, and we have talked about various types of hooks in which we could be hanging ourselves. Falsification is one of them, fraud, rumors. There's also clickbait, misleading satire. So each one of those phenomena may have certain features that could have patterns that you would identify. So we tried to test that hypothesis, and we found the patterns for satire. So what you see on the left is a typical manual way of checking your information, whether it's verified. It's from fact check, and it was processed by librarians to inform our children as well as regular patrons in public libraries. Well, to see if it's a joke. So we went and looked into the concept of satire, and we found that, and we actually wrote a tool that's available online. If you point your mobile phones at this QR code, you'll be able to access it, or you can just find satire detector from Western Ontario. You give it a headline, you give it a text, and we will tell you whether we predict it's a satirical piece or not. And you would say, why would you want to? Well, not everybody is as astute as journalists, right? And if people are missing cultural context, which has happened many times with the Onion articles on which this was based. We looked at Toronto Star, New York Times versus Onion and Beaverton. That was our input of black and white. We were able to tell the differences. So we're still running this study. Feel free to try it. We're 86% sure we're right. We get about 8 or 9 correctly. I have some examples of where satirical piece would be different in terms of its patterns, but most noticeably the length and complexity of a sentence. In terms of the one on the Onion has endless qualifiers, modifiers, multiple commas. The one on the right is a lot shorter, fewer commas, fewer clauses. So the point is there are multiple hooks, and there are potential solutions for patterns. And what we've been working to in the past year or two is providing a functionality that would distinguish the types of deception, the types of hook. And what we have here, I'm so glad Craig Silverman is not here at this point, because we did use his website as a bit of a test study. We looked to see how clickbaity, so that's yet another phenomenon, how clickbaity the headlines are on BuzzFeed, and we were able to find that it's heavily clickbaity, which I'm sure he would agree is the fact. So it's a matter of finding the patterns, and it's a matter of finding the right kind of patterns and revealing it to the users to help them make a decision, help them get off the hook and realize, well, it's a person that's written a flyer, it's a person that has clickbaited for me, it's a person that has been satirical. So we would be able eventually to provide these flags and alerts for the users. So to sum it up, in the effort to help users, I keep saying users, news readers, people that interact with the mobile devices, computers, any way we get news digitally. So we're hoping to drive a few points here with our work. Types of deception vary. Deception is very old. Not only that, it's the social fabric. If we were not to tell our secretary how great her hair looks today, the relationship would not be as good as it is. Quite often, deception is necessary, but it's not necessary in news, right? So each kind of variety of a deception in the news context may require its own tool, its own vice to pull out of that hook or to get off unhooked. And it's quite right. I'm very glad to see the emphasis on distinguishing the types of fake news. I am absolutely against that term. Absolutely. I think it models the situation. Our purpose and the purpose of automated deception detection types of technologies, the ones you'll see with alerts, is to not replace a human being. It's to assist them in decision making as a subtle flag. Perhaps it's worth verifying. We're 70% sure that this person might be lying. Would you like to go through? Otherwise, how would you ever get through your Facebook feed if you don't ever have any kind of assistance? And I have a feeling that this is going to have to go this way at some point, because just the amount of information that's coming in versus time that we have to individually investigate each individual news piece. So deception accuracy are not skyrocketing. They're in 70 percentile, 75 percentile for falsifications. For satire, they're in 90th percentile. For clickbait, we've been able to reach 93%. So we're still working on packaging it as a browser. We actually borrowed Google Chrome, and we're going to provide these functionalities to see if people like it. And I wanted to say that there are other language technologies that we take for granted, like spell checkers. Nobody doubts that spell checker is useful. In 1980s, they used to think that will wreck our students, our children in schools. They'll never spell. Perhaps they were right, actually. Having two children, I have to tell you, their spelling is awful. But this is the kind of crutch that we're relying on, and we're not judging anymore. I have a feeling different kind of language technology that I'm sure you will see. If not in this version, in some other version, they will call it fake news detector. But I warn you against that overall global, there are no predictable patterns for overall. It's still in its dawn. It still has its problems, but it will likely surface soon. So if you have any further questions, we have a chapter in a social media methods book that came out recently in Sage publication that describes in a lot of detail the two types of technologies, automated deception detectors as well as rumor debunkers, which exist. If you'd like to follow through, or if you want to get in touch with me further, you can go to our website. The lab that I had is Language and Information Technology Research Lab, literal. I don't know how that translates into French. Littéral, in some sense, a pun on the words. So that's all I had to say. Hope I wasn't too much over time.
Merci beaucoup. Non, ça va. Donc, on va prendre une brève période de discussion parce qu'on doit accélérer un petit peu. La présentation de M. MacArthur doit être un petit peu plus tôt que prévu, donc à 12h30 plutôt que 12h45. Alors, on m'a demandé d'abréger un peu la discussion. J'aimerais quand même prendre l'occasion de vous relancer toutes les trois sur la question peut-être de l'évaluation de l'efficacité. Madame Rubin, vous l'avez bien montré sur le plan de l'efficacité de l'outil, mais le défi peut-être de le rendre justement de le rendre viral, si on peut dire. Également, Ms. Bradshaw and Ms. Kozak about the impact. You gave some numbers about the reach of this stopfake.org. So I'd like to know if you have any information about how it reached the public, this effort. And well, I guess we all know have a suspicion about the efficiency political propaganda on social media, but maybe if you could add a few words on that as well.
I think the deception detection tools are largely unknown. We've written an article in 2012. There are only 4 on the market. As of 2006, there was a conference on credibility assessment as part of the natural language processing field and computational linguistics. That's another term for it. Computational linguistics, and that was held in San Diego. There were about a dozen to 15 people, so that was in June prior to election hype of fake news. There's about 12 groups that worked on deception at the time, but I'm pretty sure at this point everybody's looking for technological solutions for fake news. So I have a feeling it's going to pick up. I don't know if that's the kind of question. I have been.
You haven't been approached by Google to do this for them specifically, or?
One thing that puzzles me, if 5 people can do this fairly easily, what is stopping Google? Was there thousands of programmers to do this with even better success rate than we do?
Oui.
Yeah, I think, I'm from Germany. My name is Bernhard. I think these 3 interventions were very interesting. They focused, however, on different subjects. If I take this deception detection, what you are saying is that our legal order that we developed, let's say 300 years or longer, will break down soon. Just to bring one example, this lying, to detect lying, is something that is in Europe not interested. Everybody can lie. You are free to lie. If it comes to a criminal case and you try to use lie detectors, that is completely illegal. We think it's against human dignity. There has been, I guess, no research in Europe because we find this completely disgusting. We have also no death penalty, which is also probably very well connected, how these all criminal orders link together. Then there is another thing. For example, the legal order is based on the difference between facts and opinion. This is completely the basis of our criminal law. If you are intentionally distribute false statement, also wrong facts, untrue facts, and truth is defined by science can find out what is right or wrong, then you are, for example, that's defamation, I guess, and you could be sent into court. If you now argue that in the web we find completely other patterns, or we could, how to say, support specific patterns, or let's say detect specific patterns, like for example lies, and the people would be, let's say, in Europe now be interested whether a person lies or not, then you would shape reality, because this issue of lying becomes now an issue, which so far is not. It is morally an issue in a person-to-person situation, but the legal order does not recognize this. You have a right to lie. It's freedom of speech. Why not lying? We lie each day, and politician does it, business people more, and so I would like to make the point that if these technologies are distributed and how to say, conquer the web, then we are discussing about a completely different reality than we have now in the analog sphere. How to deal with this, I have not the slightest idea. What is more clear to me are both other statements. This Ukraine case study is very valuable, and we know that the Russians attacked also, I think they are active in all states, in Finland, in Germany, we had also starting attack of the Turkish government. They are coming out from, these are financed by the embassy. I think all of them stopped. In Germany, the impact of all these methods during election was virtually zero. And there were two reasons. One reason is that our traditional media are still very strong, especially public broadcasting. And many scientists, I speak about our communication scientists in the university, argue that this whole internet communication and social networks has a rather minor effect. You can almost forget it, because these right-wing groups discuss in their bubble, but the effect of opinion building to other people is rather without any relevance, or is with a minor relevance. And the second point is that I guess that Erdogan and also Putin followed what happened in the American Congress, and they immediately, I think, stopped the attack to Germany, because if they would have attacked the German elections, I guess the sanction would be severe. What we would pose on Turkey, I think that would be no fun anymore. We would just say, don't make vacation in Turkey, and then the country is basically lose a quarter of their economic income. So, but what is, however, most important, I found in your talk, is that, and I'm a little bit too long, that all these propaganda activities are basically financed. There is, these are not spontaneous groups. It might be that there are 3 young fellows earning per month 10,000 euro, like you would do with an attractive fashion blog. But the propaganda approaches that have some political impact are usually financed. I think in Europe we have more the problem that they are financed by the government, the Turkish government, the Russian government. We all know that in St. Petersburg they have this agency with more than 400 people. And in the US I think they are financed by the Koch brothers, by the Mercers, and even Breitbart. It went through the news that Stephen Bannon now earns $750,000 per year for a web page. So these are financed undertakings to cause specific political effect. And then indeed, and I fully agree with you, it is a task to form a level playing field. Why is CBC or you, La Presse, under different rules if it comes to advertisement in the political sphere than Breitbart or any other of these social media? So it's a question of the legal community just to enforce, to set up a level playing field and to enforce this properly. I think you have agencies like your CRTC, who can do it. And I think that is the only way you can act. Transparency will be just symbolic.
May I respond?
Oui.
Forgive my lack of knowledge in law, but I believe that some countries like Japan admit lie detection in court. Yes, Japanese. But I'm not talking about lie detection that's based on your physiobiological. This is a very different kind of a breed of a technology, right? Because what we know is that sometimes the signs of nervousness might be misinterpreted as lies, and that's why mostly in North American as well as European courts it's not admissible, because people under a lot of stress tend to exhibit similar physiological response of perspiration. Even though in the kind of workshops I've been to, it's likely to be soon installed in airports. In addition to doing this, we're going to be talking to a computer that's going to rise up to your eye level. It's going to monitor your eyebrows, perspiration, and it's going to ask you questions and look at the pattern of what it is that you're saying. So that's one point of distinction between lie detection, even though I don't think it's quite as unacceptable. There are some places in which, yeah. So this is not about biological or physiological or even facial recognition. As a matter of fact, the more information you have visually, the less likely you are to correctly tell whether it's truth or not. There was a mega truth test in the UK in which they broadcasted again, two pieces of information narrated by a famous actor, whether he liked a movie or he didn't like a movie, something insignificant. They published it in the news, they broadcast it on the radio, and they showed his interview on the video. And they asked people to call in and tell us which one was the lie, A or B, very much like I asked you. Which one do you think was more accurate? The radio. Turns out people pay attention to wrong clues. The more visual information they have, the more it interferes with their judgment. And the point is well taken, though. I do understand that there is a difference between verifiable facts and opinions. Opinions might not matter unless you're a person of huge impact, in which case it does matter. And there is also science behind the differences of patterns people use under pressure, in interrogation situation. And I think a lot of it may be transferable to the news context, where we know, in fact, most of the I think one of the studies was talking about the difference between editorials and news reports and how people expect news reports to be purely objective. In fact, most of the opinions start from the term "in fact." Not that I just made an opinion, but it's an interesting situation with language, how we phrase things and how it's being perceived. Yeah.
Oui, Marcello Vitali Rosati, Université de Montréal. Je vais parler en français. Merci beaucoup. J'avais, bon, à part, disons, les implications philosophiques de la définition de ce qui est mensonge fait a posteriori au lieu qu'a priori, ce qui me semble très intéressant par rapport à ce que vous disiez. Et l'intérêt d'un algorithme, justement, qui étudie la question d'un point de vue linguistique et non pas, justement, en se basant sur, par exemple, des signes physiques. Je vois là-dedans un problème lié à des possibilités de propagande. C'est qu'une fois que je connais l'algorithme et que je connais donc les patterns, je peux m'en servir de façon très facile pour tromper l'algorithme et donc produire volontairement des informations fausses qui passent les tests de l'algorithme parce que justement leur structure se base sur l'algorithme lui-même. Je ne sais pas si vous avez, évidemment c'est les risques du jeu, mais je ne sais pas si vous avez une idée à propos de ça.
I'm aware that's the risk. Patterns, as you've seen, we're talking about 27 linguistic patterns. When they're talking about rumor debunking software, there's upward of 1,200 patterns, 1,200 features they're looking for, who you're connected to, how often you've disseminated the tweets, where it's coming from, who else is connected to you, the user profile. So the more complicated the algorithm is, the less transparent it is, but it's also more convoluted for the people who are trying to emulate it, and it's very much like giving a recipe for somebody to lie. So we are conscious of it, and unfortunately, or fortunately, in the field of sciences, you always publish what you find. So all of what I've talked about is publicly available information, and all it takes is for somebody to read and care and apply it. I don't know what the solution to that is, whether we should be hiding it or making it more transparent. That's one of the conversations Samantha and I had a couple of days ago about transparency as well as burned.
You see, you are really, I think, really that you are changing reality with these techniques, and that prerequisites of at least the legal order, and legal order means it's a behavior that is in place for hundreds of years, and society gave itself specific rules. If you have now these sets of technologies, you are capable to detect much more than we know before. So indeed, if now your lie detection works different, maybe we in Europe have to rethink this prohibition of using techniques to find out lies. And you see, I didn't go through your list you were pointing on. It seems to me, I got this impression a couple of months before, that this combination of computer and linguistics allows you to analyze behavior of mankind deeper than before. And if you reconstruct it, you can also manipulate this much better than before. As you were saying, you are just using the right words, maybe you get more clicks, and then it's a good business model. And and you can probably increase political messaging in a sense that the people start to believe this deeper than before. It's not just advertising in general, that you can concentrate it. Maybe you can even make it much more efficient by using words. And then the whole thing, what would be needed is a discourse in society.
Thank you. I don't want to hijack the conversation. I'm sure there are other questions. I just want to point out that accuracy in 70% is not a cause for legal changes in the world at this point.
If you have an accuracy of 70%, that is a greater accuracy than you get in courtrooms. This is enormous. If we, for example, if we prohibit stealing, what is the implementation rate? 30%? Wrong driving, maybe it's 3%. Nobody expects in law that these tools work, in a sense that everybody will obey the law.
Yes, and as Pierre said earlier, it's a very old sin, lying, so I'm not sure we'll eradicate it with an algorithm, but we have to salute the effort, I think. We don't have very much time. Monsieur Sirois?
Très brièvement. Un des chiffres qui m'a laissé bouche bée est celui de Mme Bradshaw, ce ratio de 1 pour 1. Junk news versus information professionnelle. C'est la première fois que j'entendais quelque chose comme ça et je risquerais cette question qui tue, comme on dit ici au Québec, ou la question à 20 millions de dollars. Est-ce qu'on est en train d'arriver à mesurer l'impact sur le résultat de la course à la Maison-Blanche? Et je me permets un commentaire. Si vous n'avez pas vu le film Get Me Roger Stone, allez voir ça tout de suite. C'est ce conseiller dont les stratégies machiavéliques, amorales, ont contribué à amener Donald Trump à la Maison-Blanche. Et il raconte, lui, comment il a découvert le pouvoir de la désinformation à l'école. Il y avait un vote à son école lorsqu'il était tout jeune, un faux vote. On voulait savoir pour qui les élèves allaient voter, Richard Nixon ou JFK. Et il s'est dit, j'ai envie d'essayer d'influencer ce vote. À la cafétéria, il a dit à ses amis, Richard Nixon veut vous faire aller à l'école le samedi. Et les professeurs n'ont pas compris. À peu près tout le monde a voté pour JFK lors du faux vote. Et c'est à partir de là, s'est-il dit, qu'il a compris le pouvoir de la désinformation. Et j'écoute tout ce qui se dit depuis ce matin et je me dis, le glissement qui s'opère dans nos sociétés actuellement donne au Roger Stone de ce monde un pouvoir de manipuler, j'ai l'impression, mais peut-être que je peux vous poser cette question, un pouvoir de manipuler l'opinion publique comme ça n'aurait pas été possible il y a 5, 10 ou 15 ans. Je ne sais pas ce que vous en pensez.
Yeah, I'll respond quickly to that. We like to call it manufacturing consensus. It is hard, though, for us and to take our data and to say, yes, what people are reading and what they're consuming on social media affects their beliefs and then ultimately their behaviors in the real world, because there are so many different factors that go into that opinion formation process that then translates into real behavior. But, you know, we have evidence that, you know, social media was highly polluted with junk news and conspiracy information and stuff that voters did not need to be reading leading up to the election. And it's only getting worse. And just to tie this back to your presentation, we're seeing now innovations in video editing and voice software programs. So there's this it's part of the new Adobe package, and you can take someone's speech and you can add words into the speech, you can remove words, things that they've never even said, and it sounds exactly like them. Combine that with the new neural network software that allows you to I could be sitting here and I'll move and then I can get an image of like George Bush or another politician, Hillary Clinton, and they'll move exactly as I'm moving. Like our ability to create fake and deceptive information is just growing exponentially, and we're still thinking about text, but social media, the future is in video and voice, so big challenges ahead.
I wanted to just respond to your original question. We didn't study effect necessarily. I had one graphic I didn't show you. We have a Google Analytics chart over time, but I couldn't get high enough quality to project it. And what we do know, especially for foreign readers of Stop Fake, was that whenever the US media would cover what was going on in Ukraine, Stop Fake visits would peak and then they'd fall. So they had very uneven just even readership in the United States and Canada. And then this has basically tapered. After 2014, it's tapered to a pretty low level. But we were more interested in the work practices. Yeah.
On peut peut-être prendre une dernière intervention, oui.
Just another question. To both of you, do you have any idea why this attack in the States was so strong? Especially if you compare this now to Germany and I guess also to France, it was much, much weaker. It seems to be it was weaker from the amount of messages sent, and it was definitely weaker in the impact, because that would be, I think, the most important thing. And my hypothesis is that our public broadcasters take really a huge point in this, because you see, probably these Bankler bubble pictures, they are wonderful. And you saw the US here with New York Times and Hillary's media ecosystem. Here you saw Breitbart and Trump's media system. And in Germany, you saw just our bubble was in the middle, a huge bubble. People from the left and the right spoke, and then we had a small bubble where all these fascists who are now in parliament are ensembled, and that is a very different picture. And maybe the major mistake of the United States was to abolish fairness rules, to kill public broadcasting system, to basically to let the newspapers getting bankrupt, not paying any subvention from the state when they saw that public debate falls apart. So I personally think that this is probably a sign of a declining of democracy.
I'll just quickly say one of the things I think that we see, and then I'll defer to you two over here, is I think we really see in the US, I've lived there 16 years now, and one of the things that I've definitely seen over time is the decline in the belief of experts. Like even we see it today in college classrooms where some 18-year-old will challenge me like on the First Amendment, right? Congress shall make no law about the freedom of press. And I say this, and one of them says, but wait. And it's like, ugh, so, and this is partly a function of gender for me as well, but they're so, they don't trust experts. And I think this is the basis of where so much of this has its entrance. And I'll let David continue.
Mais je pense que ce qui explique le résultat de l'élection présidentielle aux États-Unis, c'est le fait que Trump a été entouré par des gens comme Roger Stone et d'autres, Manafort et Flynn, qui avaient d'assez forts liens avec la Russie. Si le Parti républicain avait nommé un autre candidat, je pense que le résultat aurait été différent. Mais on n'a pas la preuve, mais il y a des indices et davantage d'indices chaque semaine qu'il y avait collaboration entre la campagne de Trump et la Russie.
Je pense qu'on va devoir terminer, nous allons pouvoir voir les...
You see, if you look at the German election, this is not what we learned from. The social media impact of the Russian mobilization was not very huge, because what our studies say is that traditional broadcasting matters. And although we have 15% in now in the parliament, and what is interesting is that the traditional media are blamed now for this, because these fascist groups, they were doing an agenda setting through scandalizing. And I found this a little bit like in Trump world. They were coming up with messages you were not used to hear for 60 years. You see racial messages and so on. It's not worth to repeat them. And all the media, the traditional media, reported. They were just repeating this. And even in the talk shows at the TV, we were just discussing about refugees and not about international affairs, European future, and so on. And then the other side of the spectrum also started to say nonsense, because they learned that they get attention in the traditional media. So in Germany now, the traditional media, they have been attacked in a way. I haven't heard this for years and years from the center of the political scene. I don't know whether maybe our cultures
We will have
are
to
all
cut
very
at
different.
that, I'm sorry, because we are running very late.